Who was Xerxes? A pierced god-king, a brilliant ruler, or a ruthless tyrant? How did Xerxes die? To his enemies, the Greeks, he was a coward, a brute, and a man so consumed by arrogance that he once ordered the ocean to be flogged and poked with hot irons for destroying his bridge. To his subjects, the Persians, he was a godlike ruler, chosen by divine favor to expand and protect the greatest empire the world had ever seen. The truth, as is often the case, is far more complicated, messy, brutal, and filled with both brilliance and folly. When Xerxes was born around 518 BCE, no one could have guessed he would one day rule the Persian Empire. His father, King Darius I, had many wives and many sons. Court tradition dictated that the throne passed to the eldest son of the first wife, not to the younger children of later queens. By this rule, Xerxes was nowhere near the front of the line, but Xerxes had one extraordinary advantage: his mother, Atossa. She was no ordinary royal consort. Atossa was the daughter of Cyrus the Great, the empire's founder, and that gave her a kind of mythic authority within the Persian court. She wielded her influence with relentless determination, lobbying her husband at every opportunity to secure the succession for her son. Over years, her pressure became impossible to ignore. Why Darius ultimately agreed is a mystery. Perhaps Atossa convinced him that the bloodline of Cyrus carried unmatched legitimacy. Perhaps the political climate favored her faction at court. Or perhaps, as some suspected, the first wife had simply fallen out of favor. Whatever the reason, when Darius died in 486 BCE, he named Xerxes, still relatively young at around 35, as his heir, breaking tradition and setting the stage for one of history's most famous reigns. Persian princes were not raised like the scholarly elites of Greece. Education in the Achaemenid court was practical, physical, and intensely martial. At age 7, Xerxes began his training in the skills of a nobleman: hunting, riding, and archery. At 14, he received lessons in etiquette, court diplomacy, and leadership. Reading and writing were optional. Persian aristocrats often relied on scribes. In his 20s, he began the traditional decade of military service, learning to throw javelins, lead troops, and compete in athletic contests meant to build both skill and spiritual resilience. Had his father lived longer, Xerxes likely would have continued in military service until at least middle age. Instead, Darius's death interrupted his training, thrusting him into the role of king and divine figurehead of an empire that stretched from Egypt to India. The Persian Empire Xerxes inherited was enormous, wealthy, and restless. Some regions were in open rebellion. Egypt had risen up during Darius's final years, and Babylon, long a jewel in the empire's crown, was defiant. Before Xerxes could think about foreign conquest, he had to secure his own borders. His campaigns were swift and ruthless. Xerxes personally led forces to crush the revolt. Persian authority was restored, but at the cost of deep resentment among the Egyptians. Babylon's defiance was met with an even harsher response. Xerxes stripped the city of its royal status, dissolved its kingdom, and reduced it to an ordinary province, a satrapy within the empire. Ancient temples were damaged, priests were executed, and the city's symbolic power was broken. Only after these uprisings were dealt with did Xerxes turn to what he saw as his true mission: finishing his father's war with Greece. The conflict between Persia and Greece was already decades old. Darius had launched the first invasion in 490 BCE, only to be defeated at Marathon. Xerxes intended to succeed where his father failed. He began planning on an unprecedented scale. His goal was not a raid or a punitive expedition. It was full conquest. Xerxes ordered the construction of vast supply depots along the invasion route, ensuring his army could be fed and equipped deep into enemy territory. To cross the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles, engineers built 2 enormous pontoon bridges, each a mile long, an audacious feat for the time. Persian agents fanned out across Greece, bribing or intimidating city-states into neutrality. Many complied, unwilling to face the empire's wrath. The invasion force was immense. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus claimed it numbered 3 million men, a wild exaggeration. Modern estimates suggest perhaps 200,000 troops, supported by thousands of ships and a staggering logistical apparatus. Then, disaster. As the army prepared to cross into Europe, a violent storm smashed the pontoon bridges, sinking ships and drowning soldiers. Xerxes' reaction would become one of the most infamous anecdotes in ancient history. In a fit of rage, he ordered the sea itself to be punished. According to Herodotus, the waters were whipped 300 times, shackled with chains, and cursed in the name of the king. The engineers responsible for the bridges were executed. Whether this was pure theater or a genuine act of superstition is unclear, but it cemented Xerxes' image, at least to the Greeks, as both tyrannical and absurd. With the bridges rebuilt, the invasion pressed on. In 480 BCE, the Persians reached the narrow pass of Thermopylae, where a small Greek force stood in their way. Led by King Leonidas of Sparta, this army numbered around 6,000, not just the famous 300 Spartans, but allies from other city-states. For 2 days, the Greeks held the pass, their heavy armor and superior tactics nullifying Persia's numerical advantage. Victory might have been theirs, until betrayal intervened. A local named Ephialtes revealed a hidden mountain path to the Persians, allowing them to flank the defenders. Leonidas and his men fought to the death, buying time for other Greek forces to regroup. Thermopylae became legend, but it did not stop Xerxes' advance. Marching south, the Persians reached Athens. The city's population had already evacuated to the island of Salamis, but Xerxes burned its temples, toppled its statues, and left it in ruins. It was a display of total dominance, yet it would prove short-lived. In the narrow straits near Salamis, the Greek navy lured the Persian fleet into a trap. The confined waters negated Persia's numerical advantage, and the smaller, more maneuverable Greek ships wreaked havoc. Xerxes, watching from a golden throne on shore, saw his navy collapse before his eyes. The following year at Plataea, the Persian army suffered a decisive defeat. Xerxes had already left Greece by then, entrusting command to his generals. With these losses, the dream of conquering Greece evaporated. Back in Persia, Xerxes' focus shifted from grand campaigns to personal indulgence. The royal court became the stage for one of history's most sordid dramas. He first pursued his brother's wife, only to abandon her for her daughter, his own daughter-in-law. His queen, furious, plotted revenge not against her husband, but against the brother's wife, mutilating her in a brutal and public act. This crime sparked a rebellion by Xerxes' brother, which was swiftly crushed. The rebellion's leaders, including his brother and all his sons, were executed. By 465 BCE, the Persian Empire still stretched from the Indus Valley to the Aegean, but beneath its glittering surface, cracks had widened. Grain shortages drove unrest, heavy taxes fueled resentment, and the court at Persepolis had grown thick with intrigue. In this atmosphere of suspicion and ambition, Xerxes' own household was no safe haven. The man who would end his reign was Artabanus, a powerful court official and commander of the royal bodyguard. Some ancient accounts call him the vizier. Others depict him as head of palace security. But all agree on one thing. He was close enough to the king to strike without warning. Whether driven by personal ambition or the belief that Xerxes had become unfit to rule, Artabanus began plotting. He found a willing partner in Aspamitres, the captain of the king's chamber guard. Together, they planned the assassination. It was deep in the night when Artabanus made his move. The halls of the royal residence were quiet, lit only by the flicker of oil lamps. The air was still, the vast palace asleep. Artabanus moved like a shadow through the corridors, past guards who either looked away or did not dare question the most powerful man in the court besides the king himself. The king's private chambers were guarded, but Aspamitres, already in on the plot, cleared the way. Xerxes lay in his bed, perhaps dreaming of new palaces, or perhaps weighed down by thoughts of rebellions and failing harvests. He never heard the assassin approach. Artabanus struck swiftly, stabbing the great king where he lay. There was no trial, no chance for a farewell. The man who had commanded armies and whipped the sea died in silence, blood soaking into the silks of his bedding. With Xerxes dead, the obvious heir was his eldest son Darius, also called Darius the Younger. But Artabanus had no intention of handing the throne to him. The new king would be a threat to his life and power. To neutralize this, Artabanus wove a deadly lie. He went to Artaxerxes, Xerxes' younger son, and told him that Darius had murdered their father in order to seize the throne. Shocked and enraged, Artaxerxes confronted his elder brother. In the confrontation that followed, according to some accounts, Artabanus's agents assassinated Darius, making it appear as if Artaxerxes had acted in vengeance. The throne was now wide open, and Artabanus stepped into the void as regent. In reality, he was king in all but name. For 7 months, Artabanus held power. Some sources suggest he even wore the crown, though officially he was guardian to the young Artaxerxes, the only surviving royal son of age. The murder of both Xerxes and his heir had shocked the court, and whispers of treachery followed Artabanus everywhere. The balance tipped when Artaxerxes began to hear a different version of events, one in which Artabanus himself had murdered Xerxes and framed Darius. The confrontation came quickly. Artaxerxes rallied support from palace guards and key nobles who resented Artabanus's rise. In the ensuing struggle, Artabanus and his co-conspirator Aspametris were killed, some say executed after capture, others claim they were cut down in open fighting. With the usurper gone, Artaxerxes, I secured the throne. But the dynasty bore the scars of the murders. Beyond war and scandal, Xerxes also sought to immortalize himself through architecture. At Persepolis he expanded the vast ceremonial complex begun by his father. The Hall of Apadana, the Gate of All Nations, and other monumental structures were intended to last for eternity, showcasing Persian wealth and power. But eternity proved short. In 330 BCE, Alexander the Great invaded Persia. He torched Persepolis, reducing Xerxes' monuments to rubble and ash. Was Xerxes a brilliant strategist undone by bad luck, or an arrogant ruler blinded by ego? To the Greeks, he was the archetype of Eastern despotism, vain, cruel, and overreaching. To the Persians, at least during his life, he was the king of kings, appointed by the divine to rule the world. Today, historians see a more complex figure, a man who inherited an empire at its zenith, expanded its grandeur, but whose miscalculations and personal failings marked the beginning of its slow decline. Xerxes remains a paradox, builder and destroyer, conqueror and scandal maker, a ruler who tried to command not just men and nations, but the sea itself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting history videos.